So I want to thank you and I want to welcome you. And I think this is a magnificent turnout. And I hope that we can, UC Merced, do more of this. To host these kinds of debates, discussions, and sometimes even a little bit of disagreement as we move toward a better future together. And I'm delighted to see that we provided just some small fare, a little bit of coffee, water, some pastries. My leadership team and I, Mr. Klotzbier and I, were up all night making those cookies and cutting the lemon squares. And so we hope we got it all right. And because part of what we want to do is make sure that you're comfortable and that you know that you're valued and that your presence here is important and that you make the university greater by being here tonight. So I just want to thank you and for being here. We're part of the Maddy Institute, along with our other colleagues in higher education in the Valley. And I want to again thank Mark Keppler for his leadership in the Maddy and bringing this debate to our campus. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark for the remainder of the debate.
Thank you, Chancellor. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Keppler. I'm the Executive Director of the Maddy Institute. The Maddy Institute was established in 1999 by a unanimous vote of the California legislature to honor the work of Senator Ken Maddy, who at various times throughout his career represented virtually every part of the Valley, from Bakersfield to Modesto, in the state legislature. In 2018, we signed an agreement with the Valley's 4 public universities, California State University campuses in Fresno, Bakersfield, and Stanislaus, as well as UC Merced, to collaborate on public policy and public affairs issues to better serve the residents of the San Joaquin Valley by enhancing the public policy and public affairs impact of all 4 campuses on our region. Among our objectives is to provide a nonpartisan venue for the thoughtful discussion of important public policy issues facing the San Joaquin Valley, California, and the nation, and to increase participation in the democratic process. To that end, we are honored to host, together with UC Merced's CAPE, tonight's debate between 2 candidates vying to represent the citizens of California's 27th Assembly District, Democrat Esmeralda Soria and Republican Mark Pazin. Before we begin tonight's debate, I want to go over a few ground rules. Last Friday, we had a coin toss to determine who will give their opening statements first. Mark Pazin's campaign won the coin toss and chose to defer the opening statement to the Soria campaign. As a result, Ms. Soria will make the first opening statement and Mr. Pazin will follow with his opening statement. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes to make an opening statement. The timer will begin when the candidate begins speaking. The green light or green sign right here will tell the candidates when they have 1 minute left in their response. We also have a yellow sign when there's 30 seconds, and then finally a red sign when the candidate's time is up. I will let you finish the sentence as long as it's not a run-on sentence. Keep it down. All right. The same questions are going to be asked of both candidates. No question will be directed at only one candidate. Candidates will each be given 2 minutes to answer the question. The candidate who goes first will alternate with each question. At the sole discretion of the moderator, candidates will be given an additional 1 minute rebuttal if they are mentioned by name, directly or indirectly, by the other candidate during their answer. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes to make a closing statement. The candidate order will be the opposite of the order of the opening statement. We will cover the following topics: cost of living and inflation, housing and the homelessness, water, public safety and crime, and education. It should be noted that I wrote the initial questions, so you can criticize me if you don't like them. We did ask our 10,000 subscribers of our e-news aggregator, the Maddy Daily, to provide questions that we considered, and we considered those questions for tonight's debate. Neither candidate was given the questions in advance of tonight's debate. We asked that there be no applause or noise from those in attendance during the debate, save any applause until the end of the debate. I've also been informed that we have highly sensitive microphones in this room in the ceiling. So if anybody says something back there, it's going to pick it up. So, oh, sorry. So it probably makes sense to turn my mic on, but you guys can hear me, right? So anyway, so just be careful. Don't say anything out there that you don't want recorded. Okay. With that, let's begin. Ms. Soria, the floor is yours for an opening statement.
Good evening. Good evening. Okay, sorry. Good evening, everyone. My name is Esmeralda Soria, and I'm a proud daughter of the Central Valley, born and raised. And I'm running for state assembly to fight for our values, our future, and every single one of our working families, every single one of you in this room. My immigrant farm worker parents taught me the value of hard work, sacrifice, and also community. My mother taught me the importance of a good education. And so my story is the story of countless Valley families living in District 27. Too many families today are struggling. They're struggling to pay their rent. They're struggling to balance their checkbook, and they're struggling to get by. I know this story very intimately because my parents were farm workers and worked in the agricultural industry for many, many years. And this issue to me is very personal. It's not theoretical when I talk about the issues that I've worked on and the priorities that I have. I've lived it, I've experienced it. And I am very proud that I am the only candidate with the personal experience in working on the issues that our community cares about. As a council member, I have championed and ensured $2 billion for our police officers and our firefighters to make sure that our neighborhood's safe. I have fought to secure millions of dollars to build affordable housing, to make sure that they are available for families that are struggling. I've worked and championed issues to improve funding for our schools, including our colleges and universities, after school programs, parks. I've fought for infrastructure of older neighborhoods. I have that track record, and I am so, so proud of the work that I've done locally and the experience that I've gained, because it makes me equipped to go fight for the issues that we care about here in our community. As your next Assemblywoman, I will fight to secure our water supplies. I will make sure that families in every single community, every rural community, have access to safe and affordable drinking water. I will make sure that families have a place to live without struggling to figure out if they can pay their rent. We need to talk more about home ownership and have Sacramento create policies to allow people to move up into the middle class. That's what our communities need. And I'm going to make sure that we have the resources here to continue to build on the future of our valley, make sure that the UC Merced Medical School gets built, make sure that we have a strong voice in Sacramento that is not just going to fight and speak up, but that is actually going to be effective to deliver the resources and the change that we need to see here in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Soria. Mr. Pazin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me without the microphone, or would you rather have that?
I think we need it for recording.
We will do the mic. We will do the microphone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I too, third generation Mercedian. My grandparents came over from Croatia. We know the value of hard work. We grew up on a dairy on Vassar Avenue. As a retired sheriff of Merced County, there are a number of issues confronting not only Assembly District 27, but all of California, which has given every Californian higher gas prices, inflation, 9% inflation, more taxes, more regulations with one-party rule. This is why I'm running for assembly. When families must decide on a daily basis to buy a gallon of milk or a gallon of gasoline, there is truly a fundamental problem in Sacramento when one-party rule continues to raise taxes, create more regulations and burdensome taxes, and cannot put forth a comprehensive approach for water storage and or the homeless population. I have 40 years of law enforcement experience, from detective to sheriff to chief of law enforcement at OES. I have witnessed the worst: family murders, domestic violence, abused children, and a mass fatality of 82 persons during a horrendous fire. Yes, challenges do create successes. And myself and then DA Spencer kept a sexually violent predator from living in Merced County, and we have the legislation to prove it. I've been appointed to fill 4 positions and by 4 governors, and have worked on bipartisan legislation which were signed into law, which effectively helped all of Californians. So I too have been there and done that. During my tenure with Cal OES, I was co-chair of Maritime Security and an assistant director for California Homeland Security. My duties included, but never limited to, ensuring best law enforcement practices were developed in conjunction with peace officer standards and training, and spoke at many workshops and symposiums. I also initiated at Cal OES, which was signed into law by our legislature and by the governor, $25 million that was passed and signed by the governor for law enforcement reimbursement. That is an assist to the cities and counties that was never there before. Truly biblical floods, fires, pestilence over the years, which Cal OES law enforcement facilitated and dispatched, and you probably saw them in all these fires in and around the Fresno area. Hundreds upon hundreds of law enforcement mutual aid officers to stricken areas. This ensured families were safely evacuated, placed into temporary shelters as needed, and more importantly, families were not victimized again by criminals and looters. I work closely with FEMA. This goes to the homeless situation. We'll get into that. I work closely with FEMA and all state agencies during Project Room Key, which secured 15,000 plus rooms.
Could you please conclude your remarks? You're out of time.
Really?
Yeah, it goes by quickly.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pazin. But you're going to be up first for this next question. This first topic is on the cost of living and inflation. First question is going to be answered by Mr. Pazin, followed by Ms. Soria. So according to a recent Public Policy Institute of California poll, quote, Californians listed the economy and inflation as the top issue facing the state. 38% of Californians and 50% of lower income adults report serious hardships from rising prices. As the nation's largest state, California is not immune to the national global economic trends. In May, California's Legislative Analyst's Office warned that, quote, the period of rapid economic growth could be coming to an end, creating, quote, heightened risk of recession, unquote. California's Legislative Analyst Gabe Pettick has stated that, quote, predicting when the next recession will occur is nearly impossible. Question, do you believe California's economy is headed for a recession? If so, and you are elected, what actions would you champion in the legislature to prevent a recession from occurring or lessen the economic impact if a recession did occur?
We had a chance to take care of this a few months ago with the gas tax. We could have alleviated almost 53 cents, depending on your math, and saved so much money. The recession, it's just around the corner. You can't keep printing money at the federal level and not have some type of negative trickle down. We have to work together. I want to get to yes, but we can't be giving away free items each and every time. I know this may sound a bit harsh, but we have to protect what we have right now. You have hardworking families that, again, have to make a decision between a gallon of milk and a gallon of gasoline to get to and from. I go back to the gas tax. I know Esmeralda and I may have a difference of opinion on it, but that should have been suspended months ago. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to get a couple debit cards that may not even get a tank of gas. So there is a budget surplus. We need to use it wisely, but we can't go off the cliff and start making new programs that we always end up having to pay for in perpetuity. We have family. I have a grandson. We just can't be doing that each and every time. Someone's going to bear the burden on that. Someone's going to have to pay the bill at some point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin. So the question again is, do you believe California's economy is headed toward a recession? If so, and you're elected, what actions would you champion in the legislature to prevent a recession from occurring or lessen the economic impact if a recession does occur?
Thank you for that question. And I do believe that a recession is inevitable in our community. I fully understand right now that our community and our families are struggling, that inflation is a big issue. Cost of living has risen. One of the biggest costs is also housing. Many of the median household income here in Merced County is only $57,000. Think about that. So when people are paying at least half of their money that goes to housing costs, we have an issue in our community. It's not about a gas tax itself. That is a great talking point that Republicans are using right now to scare people and to say, you know, that it's the gas tax. If we suspend it, that's going to solve the problem. That's not going to solve the problem. The problem is that we have to look at issues holistically. in the as a council member, I've actually worked on these issues, worked on trying to build more housing to lower the cost, build more affordable housing to ensure that families that are paying 60% or 50% of their paycheck that goes to housing, that way that gives them a little bit more disposable income. And we have to really get serious about attracting good paying jobs in our community. I'm tired of just saying that we're the poorest region. We need to get serious about that. We need to make sure that we're building our infrastructure. You know, it's funny that Mark mentions the gas tax, yet I think 2 months ago, he was right at the ribbon cutting that provided the $100 million to build the thoroughfare that leads to this institution. That's what the gas tax is doing. You and I are paying for the future infrastructure of our kids. And those are good paying jobs with healthcare and with the pension. Those are the types of jobs that we want in our community. That's how we're going to address some of these cost of living issues. And we're going to make sure that our families are not having to make a decision between buying a gallon of milk or making sure that they have gas in their tank to go to work.
Thank you, Ms. Soria. So next question is,
I was named. Do I get a rebuttal?
yes, you do. I'll give you 1 minute.
So let me be clear. This is where the differences are. This was not to stop indefinitely the gas tax. This was to suspend it. Every little bit helps. When you start filling up your car at anywhere from 53 cents a gallon to 73 cents a gallon, it adds up very, very quick. And if anybody's been at the store lately, every little bit helps. The price of eggs, the price of milk, the price of everything has gone up. So yes, I was at the ribbon cutting. And yes, it was nice to have that money for that expressway to get here to UC Merced safely, very safely, I might add. I use it all the time. But again, let's be clear, every little bit helps. And that's what I was suggesting on suspending that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin. So, Ms. Soria, this question is for you. As gas prices have risen, the state is beginning to deposit the first round of tax rebate payments, referred to as the middle class tax refund, in California's bank accounts ranging from $200 to $1,050 in an effort to help cover the rising cost of living. That's projected to cost the state $9.5 billion. And while this year's surplus may help pay for this program, next year's picture may not be so rosy. So here's my question. Since we all know there's no such thing as a free lunch, and many economists, even President Biden, are suggesting that we may experience an economic downturn of some type in the next year, how would you pay for the solutions you just proposed? What taxes would you raise and/or what programs would you cut? Please be specific.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. And absolutely, I do believe that it is important that right now the state of California gives back to the taxpayer what they deserve. And it is all our taxpayer money. And so families are struggling, and that is a short-term and kind of a short-term solution to the issues that families are experiencing. But like you said, we have to look at the picture holistically. I believe that we need to work on regulations that are going to help speed up the building of housing in our community. Make sure that those dollars that are available currently today to build affordable housing are get out into the street to make sure that we're building that housing fast enough. As a council member, I had the experience of working to deploy or to get dollars to build one affordable housing development, and that took me 6 years. So in Sacramento, it takes too long. And that's why I want to take my experience as a councilwoman to change all those regulations and those processes that take so long so that the resources get here to our families. The other thing that we need to make sure that we do right now while there is money is build our water infrastructure. Our valley is drying up. We can't afford that. We can't our families to go without jobs. We can't afford our communities to go without safe drinking water. Many of our communities' wells are drying up and can't open their tap, or their water is contaminated. We have an opportunity to be bold and to provide that infrastructure that's going to provide good paying jobs. If they get a good paying job, guess what? Now they don't have to worry about having to put gas in their car or buying milk at the store. So we have to look at the issue in a holistic way, bring big, bold solutions to the problem, rebuild our Central Valley. If you look around in terms of the infrastructure, it is really, really bad. Think about the roads that you travel in. And so we have to be bold and look at the issue in a holistic manner.
Thank you, Ms. Soria. Mr. Pazin, so what taxes would you raise and or what programs would you cut to do the things you want to do to help middle-class taxpayers?
We already have enough taxes, and there's literature out there regarding Prop 30. We'll get to that later down the road for a one-time event. This is what I call the Democratic Mousetrap, so to speak. You see something free and it snaps shut on you. And then you have the unintended consequences of perpetually, in perpetuity, having to pay for that. I had some very difficult decisions in 08, 09, and 2010 in the recession. Governor Brown was coming into office, and it was a mess. It was a mess. We had to freeze positions at the sheriff's office. We had to cut patrol staffing because the Board of Supervisors only give so much money. We cannot go through that again. Everybody's touting the fact that there is this multi-billion-dollar surplus. We need to keep a rainy day fund. The taxes, I still say, and I know Esmeralda and I disagree, just to suspend the gas tax, I'm going to be harping on that, would help families immediately. Should have been done months ago. There are other burdensome regulations that need not be there. It's like what I call the Hamburger Commission that has started with the fast food industry. They have persons to discuss what the minimum wage is going to be. For heaven's sakes, I know I'm giving away my age, but I was working for $3.25 an hour. So for someone to get onto the Hamburger Commission to ensure that somebody else is getting almost $22 an hour, we have to be smart about this. I know these are tough discussions and tough talk, but you just can't keep up with. Thank you. Time is up.
Time is up. Thank you, Mr. Pazin, for following the clock. He did mention your name. If you want to have 1 minute for a rebuttal, you can.
I think the difference between us is that I believe that the Valley deserves to have investment. For far too long, we've been left behind when it comes to Sacramento. And that's why I'm going to go to Sacramento, to make sure that we have a strong voice, but also an effective voice. He talks about the one-party rule. Well, guess what? Yes, I'm a Democrat, and I will be in the supermajority. And that's going to get me into the room where you're negotiating to get resources here in the Valley. I don't want to be in the nosebleed seats trying to have someone hear me out or use a talking point or a soundbite that sounds great. I'm here because I want to see real solutions and real things delivered to our Valley families that for too long have been forgotten.
Thank you, Ms. Soria. Mr. Pazin, the second topic is housing and homeless. First question is going to go to you, followed by Ms. Soria. So here's the first question. Recently, California passed laws that will allow housing to be built on commercial property without requiring the approval of local municipalities. While this is seen as a victory for affordable housing advocates, many local governments oppose these bills, arguing a loss of local control since they bypass the authority of local zoning laws. Is this a good or bad idea? And as an assembly member, how would you work with local governments in the 27th Assembly District to create and implement new initiatives to increase the housing supply?
Yeah, you're probably discussing Assembly Bill 2011, where it has to allocate 25% for affordable housing in those certain areas. This is where relationships matter, and I won't be in the nosebleed seats. I hope not. I know a lot of folks, so hopefully this is where we get into working together. Back to the point. You know, the aspect of affordable housing is attractive. It's something that needs to be done. I know the city of Merced is already implementing their ADU or additional dwelling units in some areas to help the population find affordable housing. With that, you also have, you got to bear in mind, there's the AMI. You have the area median income. And we have to keep that into consideration also when it comes to the affordable housing component, that the median income is in the $50,000 range, and you need at least 30% of that to have a affordable house and even rent. The granny quarters, as I had mentioned with the ADU, is a necessity. I was talking to some realtors today, and a lot of folks are reinvesting, but we have to be careful about that zoning. Merced County has always been the first to go into recession and the last to get out of it. I go back to that dismal 08, 9, and 10 when the housing boom hit, the bubble busted, and we all suffered. So we have to be smart about it. And though I applaud AB 2011, I want to make sure we all work together as your assembly member with the local city jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin. So, Ms. Soria, again, the question concerns state regulation of housing. Is that a good or bad idea? And as an assembly member, how would you work with local governments in the 27th Assembly District to create and implement new initiatives to increase the housing supply?
As someone that has experience working in local government, I do believe that sometimes it is appropriate for the state to lead in terms of policies to address what I believe is an impending and the most critical issue of our time, which is the housing crisis that we're facing today. I have the experience having to work with state regulations that make it so hard to build affordable housing or to even get funds to our Central Valley. What we need in Sacramento is someone that understands our region. There is no one in Sacramento leading on housing. All the folks leading on housing come from big urban cities like the Bay Area and Los Angeles. We're none of those communities. We need someone that comes from rural part of the valley leading in these efforts, because housing is a little bit different here. And rather than just focusing on affordable housing, which I've been a strong supporter, and I actually led efforts to here in the valley in the state of California to get approved a regulation to legalize tiny homes. There's actually a little documentary around this in the city of Fresno. But what I do believe is that we need to not just talk about affordable housing and public housing. Yes, we need to have that, but we need to start moving away and having folks own their own home, building wealth in our communities, teaching people how they can own their own home. And we need to look at policies that allow that. If we look at the Central Valley, how the house prices are still a little bit more affordable in this area. We just need to provide the resources, the incentives that allows for developers to build in these areas that maybe don't get the type of investment. In my in the city, we were able to pass regulation to create incentives to attract investment to certain neighborhoods. So we have to work with the state, and I look forward to taking the experience that I have as a local council member and work not just with the state electeds, but also all our regional local council members. That's why I have over 50 local council members and mayors supporting me in this race.
Thank you, Ms. Soria. The second question is going to be answered first by you and then followed up by Mr. Pazin. So most Californians say that the presence of homeless people in their community has increased over the last 12 months. This is especially true in the Central Valley, where 71% in a recent poll said that homelessness has increased. The state has spent over $14 billion on the homelessness crisis and has built over 14,000 shelter beds between 2019 and 2021. The latest counts, however, indicate an increase of 22,500 homeless over the last 3 years, putting California's homeless population at 173,800. Assuming no one political party has all the answers, if elected, are there any proposals that have been put forward by a member of the opposing party or your opponent that you would support in addressing the homelessness situation in our state?
I have not heard other solutions from the opposing party. I think this is a very complicated issue. And as a council member, I have worked with Sacramento to draw down $100 million in homelessness funding, home key dollars, to create low barrier shelters. Even in the 5th largest city, which is part of this district, they did not have more than just one low barrier shelter for the 4,000 unhoused individuals. In this district, there's over 5,000 people experiencing homelessness. So we have a crisis in front of us. In the last year and a half, I've worked really hard with with Sacramento to make sure that we got the resources. We were able to purchase 9 motels up along the 99 that have been riddled with crime and blight and just blight in our community, and we've been able to turn them to low barrier shelters with wraparound services. Since the pandemic, we've been able to house 2,400 people. I will make sure, as your next Assemblywoman, that this region continues to receive the funding, not just to have low barrier shelters with wraparound services, but that we have the sustainable resources to continue to allow folks to move out of these low barrier shelters and into permanent housing. The other thing that I support is what the governor passed, which is the care court. There's a lot of individuals in our community, and this is a little bit of controversial, that don't want drug addiction program, that don't want to attend a drug addiction program or get mental health services. So he has allowed for local counties to create their care court program to ensure that folks that maybe can consent do go through the care court system, so that we provide the critical services that they need and help them to start transitioning them into low barrier, and hopefully with the long-term idea that they will transition into permanent housing, and hopefully to be able to be sufficient and have a job and be able to provide for themselves.
Thank you, Ms. Soria. So Mr. Pazin, again, the question is, assuming no one political party has all the answers, if elected, are there any proposals that have been put forward by a member of the opposing party or your opponent that you would support to address the homeless situation in our state?
The unintended consequences of Proposition 47, the under title and summary, somewhat misleading, the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act, has created part of this drama. The unintended consequences of a person that had committed a felony, been reduced to misdemeanor to infraction, has caused some of this. The homeless court or care court is somewhat muted, and I'm going to tell you why. And this is going to be a harsh term, but words matter. There's 3 categories of persons out on the street: a person or family down on their luck, mental issues, substance abuse issues. Those persons cannot be placed in a hotel room to their own devices. All you have to do is go to the Merced Inn and Suites at Childs and 99. Go talk to the Merced Hotel Association. They are riddled with car burglaries every evening. And you can see the trail. It's like an ant trail going right back over there. Merced PD's aware of it, but they are very clever and not much gets done, much to the dismay of that Merced Hotel Association. The homeless court has to have teeth in it. There needs to be a mandate. You commit the crime if you have substance abuse problems, if you have mental health problems, or you're just having a bad month, we will get you the help, but it has to be what I call linear interaction. You can't give a 3-day voucher, a debit card, and expect them to course correct themselves. It has to go through the court, where they are accountable, where they will get the necessary counseling, where they will.
Okay.
Already?
It does go by very quickly.
Now we're going to see the Monday Night Football game
I
after
think
all.
you
Okay.
Very good. Okay, so the next topic is water. So Mr. Pazin, you're going first on this one. The windup was a little long, so bear with me because it's an important issue.
Okay.
According to a recent AP story, more than 1,200 wells have run dry this year statewide. This compares to fewer than 100 dry wells that were reported annually in the 3 previous years. The AP goes on to report that the problem is particularly acute in Madera County because it relies heavily on groundwater, with about 430 dry wells so far this year. They cite the rapid expansion of almond and pistachio orchards that are typically irrigated by agricultural wells that run deeper than domestic wells. And of course, this is happening throughout the valley, despite the fact that an estimated 531,000 acres of farmland went unplanted this year. And California's drought, exacerbated by climate change, is now entering its 4th year after following 3 of the driest years on record. It would seem that increasing the supply of water by building dams or increasing pumping from the Delta are not realistic solutions to our immediate water problems due to a myriad of technical and/or legal issues involved. So what should the state do on the supply side that would be a realistic short-term fix that would increase the amount of water? And what about the demand side? Are there any current programs the state should augment or any specific new programs the state should initiate to reduce water consumption?
I'll probably have to take exception to part of that they haven't done anything. Something should have been done years ago, for heaven's sakes. You can't all of a sudden say, hey, when's the 4th of July? Well, it's the 4th of July, that's Independence Day. There was Proposition 1 dedicated $2.7 billion. That was back in 2014. Nothing's been done. The Sites Reservoir up in Northern California, nothing due to what you just said, paperwork, snafus, litigation, environmentalists having an issue with it. Then you go into the Kern County. There was the Kern Fan Project. It got stymied also. So at some point in time, those tough decisions are going to have to be made by tough lawmakers like myself to bring everybody to the table. You can't stop progress. At a point in time, the infrastructure for California was built around 20 to 25 million people, for heaven's sakes. That includes not only your water storage capacity, but also your roads. You talk about your housing. Everybody's looking the other way as they whistle past the graveyard, hoping that it's going to course correct itself, and it's not. That's why I'm the best candidate for this, because I can say, okay, no, we need to go in this direction. Yes, let's bring everybody together and start discussing this. I'm still stunned that the Sites Project will not be up and running till, if anybody has a guess, I'm going to tell you the answer, sometime past 2030. 2030. And they're still yipping and yapping about this, that, and the other, about how they're going to get that going. So it really makes you incredulous that you can't get some of these people to get off the dime. And the time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin. So, Ms. Soria, again, the question is, what should the state do on the supply side that would be a realistic short-term fix that would increase the amount of water? And what should they do about the demand side? Are there any current programs the state should augment or any specific new programs the state should initiate to reduce water consumption?
Thank you for that question. And I think all of us in this room know that water is the lifeblood of our valley, that if we don't have water, we don't have entire communities, especially in the west side. And so, I know this because I grew up in the agricultural industry. My parents were farm workers, and I wouldn't be here today if we didn't have ag. I still recall when I was in third grade, if you guys remember, there was a big, in 1990, there was a big freeze. And so what happened, there was sectors of the citrus industry that got decimated. And so families were forced, like my family, to move to Arizona. My parents had to move to Mexico to work on my grandmother's abarrotes, a grocery store. And we were forced to see our parents every weekend. If we don't get our act together in the state of California, the little Esmeraldas that had to move to Arizona to continue through their education so that my parents could put food on our table is going to happen in this valley. We need to get serious about looking at the currently infrastructure that we have. It's undersized really for the population that we have in our state. So we need to look at smart investments, build storage, also look at conservation efforts that many cities already have done. We have to really get serious about looking at innovative ways where communities can consolidate, but communities here in the valley can't do it alone because a lot of them are disadvantaged. And so they need the resources in order to be able to do that. For example, when I got an opportunity to vote to consolidate the Orange School District that abuts to the city of Fresno's line, we connected this school and received $1 million grant. But the issue is that once we connect these communities, the existing infrastructure is so corroded that the water is still dirty. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but it's going to take folks that are in the majority, that have the ability to negotiate. Because
Okay, your time is up. Thank you,
sorry,
Ms. Soria.
thank you.
By the way, you made me feel a little bad because you said when you were in the third grade in 1990, I was in my third year as professor at Cal State Fresno, so you just aged me. Thank you. So the second question is going to be answered by you first and followed by Mr. Pazin. 1 million Californians lack safe drinking water, many of them in the Valley. Is the state doing enough to protect the safety of and access to drinking water, especially for rural and low-income communities? What steps should be taken, or would you support as a member of the State Assembly to both remove harmful materials from drinking water and protect at-risk supplies?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of families here in this valley that can't open their tap and drink the water from the tap. And so the state needs to do more. I've actually had an opportunity to work on these issues, especially with those disadvantaged unincorporated communities. There's an opportunity in the state of California to work together, not just to talk about storage. Storage is going to be key, but we need to bring all the stakeholders. We need to bring the communities. We need to bring our farmers, and we need to bring the environmentalists and get us all in the room to talk about how we're going to solve this issue. Because again, we have an impending crisis in front of us. If water doesn't come to communities, communities are faced with having to purchase bottled water. Many of them already are doing that out in the west side, out in San Joaquin County. They can't do this alone. In order to have a system to clean their water, it's in the tunes of millions of dollars. They don't have the extra general fund dollars to be able to afford to clean the water. So as the state of California, we need to do more, and we need to do better behind these families that are the backbone of our agricultural industry. And so there's a unique opportunity to bring someone like me that knows and understands the value of our agricultural industry, but also is part of those same working families that are struggling to pay for the safe drinking water that they don't have in their community. And so there's a unique opportunity to tell a different story and to be able to champion this issue. Right now in the state of California, we've talked about a surplus. This is the time where we need bold leadership in Sacramento so that we can bring our infrastructure. There are other projects that we can also support. There's a lot of aging infrastructure. I supported SB 559 that would upgrade our canals around the state of California that right now are in tremendous disrepair and are not working to the best and efficient way. So there is a lot of work that can be done, but you need leadership in Sacramento.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Soria. Mr. Pazin, so is the state doing enough to protect the safety of and access to drinking water, especially in rural and low-income communities? And what steps should be taken, or would you support as a member of the State Assembly, to both remove harmful materials from drinking water and protect at-risk supplies?
Answer's obvious. It's no. Again, this goes back to, I know you're not going to like it, one-party rule. This is nothing new, for heaven's sakes. While the chief at Cal OES, Porterville, and those outlying areas were almost down to nothing. If you read the articles, I've just been talking to the mayor of Coalinga. They're in dire straits. They're lucky if they're going to have any water for the next few months because of allocations. So here's my plan. Let's get into the weeds a little bit since I have 90 seconds left. We need to reduce water usage. And we need to implement a firm and solid plan when it comes to water meters. Pay for what you use. I know it's going to be harsh, but it's something that we have to do till we get water storage up and running. And encourage the average consumer to use less. Reuse that water. The State Water Resources Control Board found that California reuses 669,000 acre feet of water a year. We need to do better. Produce. Desalination plants are a tad bit more expensive, but it's something that we're going to have to explore. So if you put it very succinctly, the plan that I offer, not nibbling around the edges, is to reduce, reuse, and produce. Nothing mysterious about it. Something that has to be done. And with that surplus, yes, we better get working now, not later, and keep kicking the can down the road. Look, I've been doing this for 40 plus years as president of the Cal State Sheriffs, before subcommittees. It's always looking the other way, letting the next legislative body handle it. It's got to stop. It'll stop with me.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin.
Can I respond to the one party?
No, he didn't mention you specifically by name, so we're going to continue on. The fourth topic is public safety and crime, and the first question goes to you, Mr. Pazin. So while California crime rates are still well below 1990 levels, a large percentage of Valley residents, 45% in a recent PPIC poll, believe that the amount of violence and street crime in their communities has increased. There is some data to support these concerns. The state's violent crime rate has increased about 6% between 2020 and 2021. You're both from either ends of the 27th Assembly District. What can you tell us about the crime statistics in the opposite end of the district where you're from? So, Mr. Pazin, what would you do for Fresno? And Ms. Soria, what would you do for Merced? And what specific proposals would you support to address the unique crime happening in those parts of the 27th District?
Talk about Fresno. Well, okay. It gets back to some ill-fated propositions that were passed that I firmly believe that their title and summary were misleading. The Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act, if you read it, it's just a recipe for disaster. This gets into the drug courts, this gets into homeless courts. Again, we saw how malls back a couple years ago were just pillaged. Flash mobs went in, and as long as you didn't get caught, or if you did get caught, it was under $950, you basically got a free pass. Zero bail. Silly. I know I got hit because there was a crime spike, but wasn't told is that we had all those cases solved. So there's no panacea of what I knew or what I didn't know. If anybody could stop crime with a magic wand or a crystal ball, I would have. But this is what we have to put more cops on the street. You can't defund. You can't whittle it down. You can't water it down. The officers have to be emboldened to be proactive, but with compassion, with sensitivity, but you can still interact with the community. As sheriff, we did community-oriented policing. I broke up the office into 3 areas so that we'd be more responsive. Central Station, North Area Station, and the West Side. So problems can be solved if people and officers get out of the car and you get the right person for the right area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin. So, Ms. Soria, again, the question is, you hail from either ends of the 27th Assembly District. You're from Fresno. You'll be representing Merced as well if elected. What specific proposals would you support to address the unique crime happening in Merced?
You know, I think that's one of the issues that we probably agree in, that public safety is right now the #1 issue in our communities. You know, just not that long ago, a week or so, 2 weeks ago, we saw the kidnapping that happened and the violent murders that happened of 4 innocent victims, including 1 8-month-old baby. So when we think about that and what is happening in our communities, I'm really concerned that we don't have the necessary resources. But I will tell you guys that my record is very different than Mr. Pazin's. I, in my term as a council member, invested $2 billion into our public safety to make sure our neighborhoods were safer. And actually, crime in the city of Fresno has gone down. And so during his time as sheriff, you know, we saw a spike in crime, as he mentioned, and that is true. We also saw jailbreaks. We also saw millions of lawsuits and botched investigations. Those are all facts, guys. Go look them up. They're news reports. And that's why I think it's important for folks to really learn the facts. And that's what we're about. We want to make sure that public safety is a top priority. There are things in Sacramento that we've learned that here locally that are not working and that we need to revise. Yes, Prop 47 47 and Prop 57 have some issues. And guess what? When there's issues, we find solutions to the problems. And that's what I'm going to go to do in Sacramento. What I also plan to do is to make sure that we're working with Merced. Merced right now was struggling to get a local measure on the ballot. When I get elected to state assembly, I'm going to work with the council members, with the mayor, with the city manager. So communities like Merced and communities across this valley have the necessary resources to make sure that our police officers are making a wage where they want to be on the job and stay on the job. I want to make sure that they have the equipment and the tools necessary to be effective, and also do program intervention and gang prevention programs. Thank you.
Thank you. You did mention Mr. Pazin. Mr. Pazin, you have a minute response.
Thank you for the extra minute for clarification. When you mentioned $2 billion, it's called passing the budget. Nothing nuanced about that. Yes, Merced County went through a difficult time, but heavy is the head that wears the crown when some decisions had to be made. And we had a La Raca Center on Sandy Mush that was built for low to medium security. Every sheriff prior to me suffered the same breaks. Very unfortunate. And it's always good to opine from the dais, from the safety of the dais, but I was on the streets. I went to those mass family shootings. I had to console everybody, and we did get those bad folks back, and our clearance rate, if you tell the rest of the story, was nearly 90%. 90% clearance rate on murders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin. So the second question is going to be answered by Ms. Soria, followed by Mr. Pazin. So we already talked a little bit about this. California established something called the CARE courts, that stands for Community Assistance Recovery and Empowerment court systems, that would redirect those with severe mental health and substance abuse disorders into the behavioral health system. Proponents of the initiative believe it would help provide resources such as housing and mental health treatment to those who need it most. Critics, however, have raised concerns about potential civil rights violations, especially in communities that are historically overrepresented in the criminal justice system. Are CARE courts one possible solution to the crime problem? What, if any, legislative oversight would you like to see to ensure that the civil rights are protected by those involved?
As I mentioned earlier before, this proposal was a little controversial for the reasons that you mentioned, but I think that what we're experiencing today means that we have to try something different. We really have to make sure that we're providing the critical mental health and drug addiction resources to those individuals that won't do it themselves. That will help alleviate some of the crime, the petty crime that we're seeing, the smash and grabs that are happening in all of our local communities. So I do support that, but I do believe that there needs to be some local oversight. And that's why it's important that every single county works together with their local community, the behavioral health folks, to make sure that this program actually works as is intended to do so. It is not going to be the panacea of solving the issues that we have with homelessness and the connection to petty crime in our community. There are other things that we can do as well, because right now we have some less accountability in our community. People, they can go into a store and rob someone and it'll be under 1,000 and then there's no consequences. And so we need to make sure that we are holding people accountable and deterring them from victimizing business owners and community folks. And so we need to look at where there's opportunities to modify the existing law so that our communities are safe. And that's what I've done as a council member. That's why I, even though he says it was a budget and a pass-through, no, I advocated to make sure that our officers were the highest paid. I advocated so that we could get dispatchers. So people, when you called the 911, you could actually get someone to respond and get someone at your door or wherever you need for that critical help. It wasn't just passing the budget. We get to craft the budget along with the mayors of the city. And so that is the work. And I'm proud of the resources that we have given to both our police officers and our firefighters.
Okay, Mr. Pazin, you have a 1-minute rebuttal, if you wish.
He is me. So, yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, I worked with the Board of Supervisors, and we also put officers on the street during that time. But it is passing the budget. And until you're out on the street, you're the police chief, the sheriff, the commander of a station, it's a whole lot different than being from the dais and making those decisions. Glad you did. Glad they're the highest paid in the valley, but it's still a whole lot different making decisions from the corner office when there's theft, family murders. We'll mention their names. I had a couple serious ones here, and then just the recent one with the Sikh community travesty. So yes, passing the budget, fine. Being on the ground, whole lot different.
He did refer to you indirectly, so I'm going to let you have a minute rebuttal. It kind of sounds like I handle cases as a labor management arbitrator, so they have direct exam, cross exam, redirect, recross. We may be going back and forth here.
Yeah.
1 minute.
No, all I will say is that the work that is done as a legislator is critical. That's why I'm running for state assembly. And it's not about being in the corner office. It's about being out in the community also as a council member, understanding the intricacies, meeting with the various stakeholders, including our chief of police, to understand how, as a legislator, we're going to improve in the types of resources and tools that we're providing them so that the safety of our neighborhoods increase. That's what a legislator does. And that's why I'm the best candidate for this, race, because I have the legislative experience.
Thank you, Ms. Soria. Well, I finally get to ask you that question on care courts. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about care courts as one possible solution to the crime problem. And what, if any, legislative oversight would you like to see to ensure that the civil rights and equitable treatment of those involved?
Yes, the care court is controversial, but you know what? I won't walk away from controversy. It needs to be done. Very simple. The homeless court would put persons in the system. And during our previous discussion, we talked about linear interaction. It's just like vertical prosecution. You keep moving everybody around. Nothing gets done, for heaven's sakes. I strongly advocate for the removal of Prop 47. Those persons that commit felonies can show that they are being taken care of through the proper counseling, whether it's mental, substance abuse, or the third category, you've hit a tough time in your life. It needs to be done. We've got, again, the surplus budget, and I know some persons are worried about their civil liberties. I get it, but what about your civil liberties? What about you going out in the parking lot after dark? What about you going to the 7-Eleven or to a store and being accosted by a homeless person for some change, or in some cases being assaulted, for heaven's sakes? Once that occurs, we know they have to recalibrate. And that's why I strongly advocate it would never walk away from a controversial decision such as this. It's needed and it's long overdue.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin. So our final topic, we've already reached the end. Our final topic is education, K-12 education. Education is by far the largest expenditure in the state budget. About 10 years ago, Governor Jerry Brown restructured how state funds school districts by implementing something called the local control funding formula. Under it, all school districts get a flat amount based on their enrollment, and school districts with a higher concentration of low-income students, English language learners, and foster youth receive additional funding through supplemental and concentration grants. The idea was that students with higher hurdles need more resources. In 2021, the state budget increased the size of those concentration grants. Some have suggested that funding should be calculated for each school rather than for each district. It should be noted that in 2019, there was a state audit that found it was nearly impossible to determine whether school districts are spending their supplemental and concentration dollars on services for disadvantaged students for whom they're intended. After a decade's worth of experience, does the legislature need to tweak this formula? If so, how so?
I don't want this to take any of my time, but Chancellor, I love your socks. Can we get a pair? They're Bobcat socks. Those are very distracting.
Okay, they'll be on sale after the debate.
On the clock. Here we go. So Very important. The distribution of funding needs to be reviewed. You know, I was talking to some educators and such, and how can we do that? There are persons that are falling through the gaps on this. There are persons with young adults going through the system that have medical conditions. They need to be thought of. You have foster care. They need to be thought of. Special needs. They need to be thought of. So that all has to be put in the calculus for financial distribution. The other component is, if I may, is that I would, upon being elected, immediately appoint a staff advisor to ensure the connectivity with not only the K through 12, but the counties of offices of education, state colleges, and universities. We need that one-on-one review so that not only are the finances properly dispersed, but we also know the needs of those categories. I could get into the weeds on this, but the other aspect of it also is we need to increase the broadband and the internet. And we also have to showcase what we call the ACP discount. And it's a very, very simple concept. It gives those persons a connectivity partnership at a discounted rate so they can download textbooks. Going to school, we can all identify with this. How much was a textbook? Well, if we increase the broadband in those rural areas, help bring it up to the 5G, we can download those textbooks at a nominal cost and then use the ACP funding mechanism to help those families. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin. So, Ms. Soria, again, in 2021, the state budget increased the size of these concentration grants. Some have suggested that the funding should be calculated for each school rather than each school district. It should be noted again that the state auditor found that it was nearly impossible to determine whether the school districts are spending these funds on disadvantaged students for whom they're intended. After a decade's worth of experience, does the legislature need to tweak the formula? And if so, how so?
Well, as a first generation college student, as an English language learner, and as an educator myself, education for me is very, very important because we know the power of education in a community. And yes, the LCFF formula provided additional resources for districts, but I think that it is important that we make note that in certain districts, they were not spent in an equitable way, and that if there are needs to tweak the formula and the way that we invest in public education system, we need to look at every school district and every school is very different. I've had the opportunity to go to La Grande, to go to Planada, and what I hear from a lot of the superintendents, especially these really small rural communities, is that Sacramento tends to do kind of a blanket approach, a one size fits all. Well, the Valley is very different. The Valley is very rural. Merced County is very rural. We need more money for transportation because we have to bus our kids to school. And so we're different than you know, the Bay Area and the more urbanized cities. And so we need to look at formulas that are going to be equitable for the Valley. And I don't think that even though they've attempted with the LCFF formula, I don't think that the Valley is receiving the monies that they deserve. We have so much of the greatest needs here in our community. Our English language learner numbers are higher than in other areas. And these kids, in order for them to be successful, need the resources and the teachers available. In a lot of these communities, we also need to make it more flexible that these dollars so that we can attract the educators to want to go and travel to sometimes some of the more remote cities. We want to make sure that quality teachers are teaching our kids, but we need to look at solutions that are more flexible for the Central Valley so that we're truly addressing the needs. I know that LCFF formula was an attempt, but there is an opportunity to work with our educators to make reforms so that the Valley wins.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Soria. So the second question is for you first, followed by Mr. Pazin. It's been reported that, quote, despite years of economic growth in California and record spending toward public education, study after recent study has warned that school districts are heading for long-term financial problems. According to the article, quote, the local control funding formula has increased spending by about $24 billion since 2013, but student enrollment has declined. and fixed costs such as healthcare, special education programs, and employee pensions obligations have dramatically risen. California currently allocates about 40% of the state budget for K-12 education. Since life is always about choices, should more be allocated by the state for K-12 education? If so, how much more? And what state taxes would you have to increase, and or what other state programs would you have to cut? On the other hand, if you don't think more state money should be allocated to K-12 education, what solutions would you offer as a state assembly member to address the long-term financial problems that school districts are likely to face?
Thank you for that question. I believe that investment in our public education system should be a high priority for our community, because we know that education can be transformational. And so what I've heard from the educators that I've been able to meet with is that we don't have those resources necessary. What I have seen schools district do right now, especially because they do have additional dollars, is that they have saved. They've created a rainy day fund to make sure that the extra services that they're providing, that they have the backup and support for those more difficult times. But I do believe the state of California needs to really look at the way that we fund our public education system. You know, we still, when we look at other states, we're still underfunding our public education system. And so when we're underfunding our public education system, we're not investing in our community, in really what will change. And so I believe that it's going to be critical that when we're looking at our state budget, that we look at the opportunities to add additional funding. I'm sure there's a lot of things in that budget that maybe don't bring the types of fruits that an investment in our public education system. And so I'm willing to first, before looking at any tax, comb through the budget, just like I've done as a council member, comb through the budget and eliminate things that don't make sense. I can assure you that there are some commissions that are probably not making a difference, that are outdated, that are still being funded today. And so we have to first look there before asking our taxpayers to pay more.
Thank you, Ms. Soria. So again, we're talking about choices here. And since you have quite a bit of money already allocated for K-12 education, should more be allocated? And if so, what state taxes would have to be increased to pay for that, and or what other programs would have to be cut? On the other hand, if you don't think more money is needed for K-12 educations, what solutions would you offer as a state assembly member to address the long-term financial problems that school districts are likely to face?
You know, back when Jerry Brown was governor, we worked together on Proposition 30. It brought in billions of dollars, but the smart aspect of what Governor Brown did at the time, it was a sunset. It sunsetted that income tax. Then comes around Prop 55 that extended those that made X number of dollars into that income tax. The answer to the question is there's plenty of money. Is it being used wisely? As your next assembly member, I would strongly urge a comprehensive review of those school districts. I mean, I know this is going to be, could be difficult, but maybe some have to be consolidated. When you have number of superintendents in a certain geographical area, it may be time just to review how all this works out. The other thing is parents need to be more involved. I think COVID was shocking to everybody when a lot of schools got shut down, and traveling throughout the district, a lot of parents are now homeschooling, which brings down the average daily attendance, which means less money for the schools. So again, you have the cascading effects of decisions that are made, whether it's COVID, whether it's funding, whether it's Proposition 30 or 55, or however you dice it, you need to make sure that it's being used wisely and that it's being used efficiently. Again, when you're starting to homeschool kids, you've lost them. And that's why that critical ACP about getting that over there, the connectivity program, is also very important. I just want to make sure that we're all clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin. So we are now at the end of the topics part of the debate. We're now going to go to closing statements. Since Ms. Soria went first in the opening statement, Mr. Pazin, you get to go first in the closing statement. You have 3 minutes each.
I got to tell you, this is always fun getting together with everybody and just kind of showing the differences. It's all good. I want to thank Mark and the Maddy Institute. Chancellor, great socks. Thank you for being here. And for all those persons that I invited to be on the Zoom meeting. This is a very important race. And I just ask for your support. I would submit to you the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. We go back to all the things that should have been corrected years ago. And I will not shy away from making those tough decisions. Whether it's the corroded pipes in the water that should have been fixed a long time ago, water storage, Sigma, GSA, you name any acronym, we've got a problem that's going to find it, okay? We talk about the budget surplus. We can't decimate it with the mousetrap. Something free, it snaps shut on you, and you're forever indebted. We have to be smart about it. I have worked with both Democrats and Republicans throughout my 40 years in law enforcement as president of the Cal State Sheriff's Association, whether I was at subcommittees with as chief of law enforcement for Cal OAS and working with both governors and Director Ghilarducci. So I'm well aware and ready at a moment's notice to get into the mix and not shy away from the necessary decisions to correct some of the kicking the can down the road. It has to be a deliberate and bringing everybody together, whether it is water storage, because some environmentalists don't feel it should be done. It's to implement use, reuse, and produce water policy that has been developed, whether it's the homeless court, where they have committed a crime, for heaven's sakes. Maybe it wasn't on their own accord, and maybe they have some issues. Let's get them corrected with linear interaction and make sure that they have the continued support, not a 3-day voucher at a hotel with a debit card to get a hamburger and fries, but something that's comprehensive that ensures that they become a productive member of society. Again, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Kenneth Soria for being here, for you, Mark, for all this, and just appreciate everyone being here and taking the time from the Monday Night Football game to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pazin. Ms. Soria, your closing statement.
Great. So thank you so much. I do just want to say thank you to the Maddy Institute. Thank you to Chancellor Muñoz and UC Merced for opening up this great space so that we can all talk and have a conversation about the critical issues that matter the most to Valley families. I will say that you guys heard today where we stand in our priorities. But what I will tell you is that even though Mark says that it's insanity to do the same, the reality, though, is that Sacramento does have a supermajority Democrat. And what that means is that we need to elect someone that is going to be part of that majority, that can be in those negotiating rooms, that has a relationship with the governor, that has the experience to deliver on behalf of us. We can't afford to not have a seat at the table, because guess what? There goes our future. There goes the future of Merced County. We can't afford that. With all due respect, the assembly member down the street, Assembly Member Patterson, he hasn't delivered 1 penny to this valley. 1 penny. I don't want to see the next 2 years where we don't receive 1 penny. We deserve to have millions of dollars invested because our infrastructure is in disrepair. We need millions of dollars to continue to build affordable housing, and also make sure that we're creating programs so that folks that want to own a home have the opportunity to own a home. We need to get those millions of dollars so that our institutions like UC Merced and Fresno State are thriving in our valley and are educating the future valley residents. We need to make sure that we get that medical school built. And with all due respect, Mr. Pazin is not going to get the medical school built. I will, because I will be at the table and having those conversations with the governor, with the Speaker of the House and the Senate pro temp. We need leaders that are not just going to shout and say, this is what we need, but someone that has a track record in delivering, like I delivered as a council member, and someone that is going to bring those dollars that we deserve here to this community. So I hope that you guys all vote this election. I know that there's a lot of people that shy away during a midterm elections. We had 16% of voters vote during the primary. We can do better. Our families deserve to have better. And that's why I'm running for the state assembly, because I want to represent you. I want to make sure you have a voice in Sacramento and that we're getting our fair share of resources that we long time deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Soria. Well, I was going to, if Assemblymember Patterson was here, I would give him a 1-minute rebuttal.
So I get 2 minutes.
But he's not here. If he's out there in the internet, let me know, Mr. Patterson, and we'll get you on at some point. But she did mention you, so I'm going to give you a 1-minute rebuttal.
At the risk of missing out some Monday Night Football, this is about relationships, and I realize there is a supermajority, but I've worked through that before. During the verse curse, I worked with Kathleen Galgiani and Jeff Denham to get legislation passed and signed by Governor Schwarzenegger. Metal theft during when the methamphetamine was on the rise, and there were just crazy people ripping anything off they get their little mitts on. We got legislation for that too. So I know that's a general theme, but I'd have to challenge that statement. I can work with anybody, and I will.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pazin. So I want to thank our guests, Chancellor Muñoz with UC Merced. Thank you so much for hosting us, you and Cape, as well as our staff at the Maddy Institute, and Steve Graham, who put this task on my desk. Thanks a lot, Steve. I also want to thank the candidates who agreed to tonight's debate and helped inform voters on where they stand on some important issues confronting the 27th Assembly District. Just think about it. It's not easy answering these questions out of the blue, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. And it shows that we have 2 very good candidates running for this Assembly District. So I want to echo what Ms. Soria said. Get out and vote. That's your responsibility. They've done theirs. Now you do yours. Finally, I want to thank our audience for participating in this fundamental aspect of a healthy democracy. Thank you and good evening.